It's time to accelerate. Hi, I'm your host, Andy Paul. Join me as I host conversations with the leading experts in sales, marketing, sales automation, sales process, leadership, management, training, coaching, any resource that I believe to help you accelerate the growth of your sales, your business, and most importantly, you.
Hello and welcome to Accelerate. I'm excited to talk with my guest today. Joining me is Tony Delmercado. He's the CMO of Hawke Media and founder of 1099.me, a tax management service for entrepreneurs in the gig economy. I'm fascinated by that. I want to make sure we spend a few minutes talking about that. So, Tony, welcome to the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Andy. I'm excited to be here and looking to add some value to your listeners.
Oh, great. Well, I'm sure you'll do that. So, take a minute and introduce yourself before we get started.
Sure. Yeah, my name is Tony Delmercado. I'm actually the COO of Hawke Media, not the CMO.
Sorry.
That's okay. We're an outsourced CMO, so I guess you could say
I conflated those two, right? Okay.
We're all CMOs in our own right. I'm originally from Minnetonka, Minnesota, a west suburb of Minneapolis, and I grew up doing a lot of different things, played music and played sports, and always was interested in digital. I'm 33 years old, so I grew up in that era when it was just becoming cool to be online, and I had an opportunity to work at a few different companies where I could ply my trade in the online user acquisition and fan acquisition space, which is a nice blend of sales and marketing. And I've had, again, some success in the direct sales world and managed a pretty sizable team in that business for about 5 years. And landed at Hawke Media through my business partner and CEO, Eric Huberman. He and I had worked together on a couple of other projects. And in the late 2013, he was working as a consultant under the name Hawke Media and was finding that a lot of the recommendations and strategy he was providing for people just wasn't being executed, and a lot of money and results were being left on the table as a result. And so we got together, and he also hired a couple of other people to help with specific channel management. And fast forward, 26, 27 months now, and we've got a 42-person team of people that all do digital marketing pretty darn well. And it's been a lot of fun. We've learned a lot along the way, and we are really excited to continue helping all the businesses that we have. We've worked with about 230 companies in the last couple of years, so we're not focused on managing a small roster of Fortune 500s or something. We're actually more excited about the SMBs and the helping the mom and pops of the world kind of grow their businesses online.
All right. Well, we're going to jump into that. But first, let's take a step back and you said you were in sales for a while. Let's explore what you did in sales before you moved to the dark side of the force with marketing.
Yeah, I went to architectural school, and I really enjoyed that. And that was in Boston, Massachusetts. And I decided that I wanted to be a West Coast architect. So I moved out to I was on my way to San Francisco, and I got caught in Sonoma because it was just so pretty, and I ended up living in the Sonoma, Santa Rosa area for a little while. And while I was doing that, I went for a job interview for what appeared to be a pretty simple, straightforward sales position, and it was for Cutco Cutlery, which I'm sure many people are familiar with.
Oh, many of my guests have started their careers with Cutco.
Yeah, and so I think I would probably land in that same bucket. And so went out and did some in-home presentations after 3 days of training, and was fortunate to do really well right out of the gate. And I think I've always had sort of a natural.
Well, what was the key? What do you think was that you were doing that attributed to your success?
Yeah, I think the first and foremost is it was great training, right? I think I've always been a decent communicator, and I'm not afraid to ask questions and be persistent and be consultative, at least in my sales style. But there was great training. It was a really great program. Big emphasis on personal and professional development, and a lot of great tools and resources. People that had been there, great community of folks that were willing to share.
But you were walking neighborhoods, knocking on doors, though, right?
Yeah, we're actually through referrals.
Okay, all right, referrals.
Starting with a warm network and then getting referred to, their friends, and they refer you to their friends. And so definitely in-home appointments, but not banging on the door like they used to, I believe, in the early 80s. That was sort of the model. And I know that, Kirby Vacuums and a lot of other companies have kind of made a name for themselves by going out and banging on doors. And so we didn't have to do that, but we did still have to muster the courage to pick up the phone and ask for an appointment. And it was nice to have a group of people around that could help kind of shepherd me along. But I think another one of the keys to success is I've just never been scared of no in anything that I've done. I'll ask, I'm now married with a son, but when I was younger, there'd be the guys huddled around the bar, pointing at a pretty girl, and I'll go, yeah, I'll ask her out. The worst that's going to happen, she's going to say no. If I have to call and ask for an order, no problem. Worst that happens is they say no. Best case scenario, they say yes, and that's great. And so I've never really had a fear of that no response, and I think that definitely helped me out in my sales career. And then later on, I've always been a psychotic curator of culture. I just really like keeping a certain vibe. And so in the recruiting side and in the sales management side, that was very, very helpful. But sales success, long story short, I think there's a great program, and I worked hard. Called a lot of people, did a lot of appointments.
So in your curation of popular culture, how's your psychosis manifested?
Well, it's less about popular culture. It's more about the culture. I'm interested in what it feels like when you walk into a place, especially a professional environment. There's some offices, hearkening back again to the Cutco and Vector days. You could walk into an office in San Diego where you're sitting today, or you could walk into an office in Los Angeles where I'm sitting today, and based on the manager, they could feel totally different. Not just the aesthetics and the optics of the place, but the way people interacted with each other, the way people interacted with guests, the way that people, the language they used, how they dressed, their whole way of being, it was fairly easily manipulated by the managers in those rooms. And so I've always been really interested in curating a culture that is authentic to me, very selfishly, frankly, just so it's easy for me to go to work and go home and be the same guy. And so if you came to our office up here in Santa Monica for Hawke Media, you'll find a bunch of pretty laid back, younger, smart, hardworking people that are also wearing T-shirts and flip-flops and having a beer at 3:00 and a whole bunch of other things. So
what time is it?
not quite yet.
Not quite. Okay.
St. Patrick's Day as we're doing this here.
Right.
So.
Make sure it's green. Well, it's interesting. When you're talking about the curation of the culture, is sort of the flip side of that. At least as I understand it, the way you're describing is really sort of the awareness and empathy for the people you're speaking with as well, and from a customer perspective. So. Being very conscious of impressions and creating positive impressions. And that's something I know you've written about. I've seen some of your articles online about customer acquisition, that how important first impressions are.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's cliche to say, but you never get a second chance to make a first impression. And I think it's worth understanding your audience, whether that's a one-person audience or a 10,000-person audience, before you walk through the door or pick up the phone. And by making the right impression could be different for a certain type of person versus another. And you want to be perceived in a certain way, but also meet somebody at their level. And, some of these ideas around empathy have been written about, ad nauseum oftentimes in sales language, but I think they're super important. That's why they get written about so frequently.
Well, I think one of the reasons they keep getting written about is because salespeople in general do a relatively bad job of embodying that. Otherwise, the stereotypes of salespeople and the fear of salespeople probably wouldn't be as strong as it still is.
Yeah, good point.
Yeah, so let's talk about this whole challenge of outsourcing a CMO role, because it seems to me like it's really interesting in this time where there's still a lot of talk in this digital age about sales marketing alignment. And, obviously it's important. There's a lot of different definitions of what that alignment constitutes. But it seems like one of the challenges you probably face as you come in as sort of an outsider is how do you make that happen?
Yeah, it's interesting too when you're talking about the types of businesses that we work with. We work with, the lion's share of our roster is in the e-commerce space, and so a lot of that is transactional and oftentimes doesn't involve a salesperson, right? It involves a sales process and maybe some automated, email nurturing and things that are a proxy for interpersonal sort of sales. And then a lot of our B2B clients, software as a service clients and things like that, definitely require a person, a real live human to get on the horn, and sort of the interplay between lead generation, lead nurturing, and closing sales is super important. So when we get plugged in, regardless of the size of the company, and we get in there and start sort of mucking it up and generating leads, I'm a full funnel acquisition marketer. If you look at it either B2B or B2C, I really like acquiring new customers, and that full funnel sort of perspective makes it important that the initial point of contact, the first time someone discovers your brand or your service, your product, is consistent all the way through the messaging that comes out that nurtures that lead with a sales call, if it is, with a follow-up call, with an in-person meeting. And I think that's, for us, one of the areas that has been a challenge at a variety of different companies, because we oftentimes walk into existing cultures or processes, and we're just the vendor, right? A new guy coming in as a marketer, and oftentimes a sales manager, especially one that's been there a while, might say, "Hey, these guys are marketers. Let them worry about the marketing. We're over here in sales." But I think understanding how that whole process is informed by each of the other parts of the funnel is really important to efficient lead generation and high closing percentages.
Yeah, I mean, certainly sales always seems to be spending a lot of their time trying to modify the message that comes from marketing. So, as a CMO, as a marketing organization, how do you work with sales to get alignment on the messaging? Because there's really two parts, and we'll talk about the second part in a second. But I've seen this for the decades that I've been in business, over a wide variety of businesses from in the tech space, including digital marketing spaces. Is how do you work with sales effectively to say, okay, let's come up with a message that you sales don't have to start modify on the fly or feel compelled to think that you have to modify on the fly?
Yeah, I think it's. I think you just mentioned it, is you work with sales, right? And it's less about what the process looks like. It's more just getting on the same page and making sure there's transparency and consistency through whatever product or service you're delivering, how that's being framed and articulated on a sales call, and then what the marketing material looks like, or what the ads look like, or what the lead generation campaign looks like, so that those things are all consistent. I think that's probably the most important thing. And you touched earlier on the sort of stereotypical or the bad elements of sales that people sometimes perceive or fear. The easiest way to get rid of that is just be super transparent, front to back. I think where there can be a challenge is in convincing salespeople who are chomping at the bit, oftentimes quota-driven, commission-driven, to go out there and dial it back just a little bit so that they're able to close more in the long term and retain contracts longer, as opposed to just getting really excited and hypey and sometimes embellishing in a way that's off-brand, and then ending up with upset customers, a bruised reputational sort of asset, and then it's harder. You're fighting uphill with everybody you meet, as opposed to everybody knows referral business is great business. If you're consistent through the sales, marketing, and execution process, then it's just easier on everybody.
Yeah, I was talking to one guest who, their company, what they do is they have weekly meetings with sales and marketing, with the whole sales team and the marketing leaders, where they really get a sense of what sales is hearing from the customers as a result of them trying to communicate the message that marketing had done. Mm-hmm. Seems to me like that's a pretty essential best practice, but it's interesting as I've pinged other companies how rarely that seems to happen.
Yeah, it's remarkable. And look, I mean, I'm not going to sit here and say that even Hawke Media in our B2B client acquisition efforts are batting 1,000, because we're not, right? And I think that's part of the fun of running a business, whether you're in a sales team or a marketing team or an operational team, is there's just always room for improvement, and even on the basics, even on the best practices, tightening up that funnel, getting all the leaks in the boat patched, and just working towards an ideal. And as long as you've got an ideal out there and you understand best practices, it gives you something to show up for every day when you get to the office anyway.
True. So one of the sort of sobering stats that I'd seen recently was that it said that salespeople spend up to 40% of their time either searching for or modifying marketing content to help them, at various stages of the sales process. And that's sort of interesting to get your feelings about that, because that seems like a big number. But it's a fairly reputable firm that came up with the number. So just sort of interested in your first impression, then let's talk about if that mismatch really exists. How do you get that resolved?
Yeah, that's a big number. I hadn't heard that stat, but...
and this is in the B2B space, right? So...
Yeah. I mean, I can certainly see that. I can see how that would be possible, and obviously, if it's coming from a reputable source, it's not just possible; it's happening. So, I think maybe that disconnect comes from an understaffed marketing department, or perhaps a less than stellar CMO, head of digital, head of marketing, whoever that person might be. And depending on company size, that might just be a function of budget or where they're at in their growth stage and they can't afford it. Maybe it's a non-funded company that's bootstrapped and just trying to grow. And I think those things are marketing. I feel like it often is the first to go, right, in a round of cuts. Everyone knows that sales is really important and got to have people out there beating the streets and banging the drum so that the lights stay on and the revenue keeps coming in. But oftentimes marketing is a function that gets absorbed into somebody else's job. And so they say, hey, you know what, I can probably, create some collateral for our sales guys. I can probably run a Facebook ad. I can probably, design our email newsletter that goes out once every Tuesday or whatever that might be. In reality, those things are hard. Those things are hard to get right. And when there's so much noise out there in the market, without good marketing effort, it's hard to distinguish yourself. And so, yeah, it's funny. I'm still trying to digest the reality of 40% of a sales team's time being dedicated towards marketing. That's pretty intense. I guess if I were to stumble across said situation in my role now, first thing I would do is make sure that there's some resources, whether it's time or money or both, spent on marketing and advertising.
Yeah, well, in this case, I said the 40% was looking for the content that someone says exists somewhere, marketing says exists, or I said the one I found most more disturbing was that they were spending time modifying it, because nothing more horrifying than the thought of a sales rep taking a marketing presentation trying to like a PowerPoint trying to modify it.
Yeah,
it's not a very effective use of time.
Yeah, not an effective use of time, and again, to our topic just a second ago, probably not fully transparent. There's probably a reason that language is in there. Again, depending on how the organization is structured. I mean, we don't let the tail wag the dog, so to speak. We start with what we do at Hawke Media. This is, and then all of our marketing material and all of our sales presentations are a reflection of that. So sales is really the last to modify. It's more, here's what's going on, here's what we do, here's how we want to position this. Now go do that in the best way possible using your skills, and of course be smart about lead generation and so on. So if I found out one of our sales guys was like modifying our pitch deck in order to fit what it was that they thought was important, I would certainly have a few follow-up questions.
As you should. Okay, we're going to take a short break and we'll be back in just a second with talking more about lead generation and marketing in this digital age with Tony Delmercado. Be right back.
Hi, this is Andy. Connect and Sell is used by sales reps at nearly 1,000 companies, including hundreds of technology startups and several Fortune 500 companies, to overcome the challenges of getting prospects on the phone. Companies using Connect and Sell grow their revenues faster by enabling their sales reps to have more sales conversations in 90 minutes than they could otherwise achieve in an entire week. Connect and Sell can be deployed directly to your sales reps, or you can take advantage of their Outbound on-demand service, which delivers qualified prospect meetings scheduled directly on your sales reps' calendars. Visit connectandsell.com to learn more about how Connect and Sell can start filling your pipeline today.
All right, welcome back. Talking to Tony Delmercado. And so a question I have that sort of follow on that we were talking about before the break is, we're talking about sales, marketing, alignment, and I know it's sort of a tough question, but I heard a lot recently, and I've been to several conferences, and it's like the dividing line between sales and marketing is shifting fairly substantially in B2B cases. In some companies, in some cases, we're seeing companies where marketing's actually taken over responsibility for a good portion of the inside sales responsibility, the sales development reps that are doing the proactive outbound calling. So in your mind, where should that line reside?
Yeah, it's a sticky situation to put my foot out into. And as a company that positions itself as an outside CMO, I certainly don't want to put any professional salespeople or sales managers on the defensive. But I will say that depending on price point and the service that you're offering, there is a lot that marketing can do that might negate some of what used to require a salesperson. One of the things that I'm really hot on for a number of reasons is the multitude of ways that we can now generate leads online and nurture and qualify those leads to a point of needing less salespeople to nurture and qualify leads, and using some automated email systems, using some behaviorally triggered email that comes out, retargeting effectively. So, showing different messaging to people at different stages in the funnel. The technology is going to continue to get better and better. And if you've got a technologically savvy marketing department, you really can step over into what used to be sales territory by doing some of that lead nurturing and initial outreach in a way that doesn't feel mechanized and doesn't feel automated, but actually feels personal and has a name on it and has a link on it, and these kinds of things that, I think in the long run, for the people that are good salespeople and have sales skills, it's just going to help them spend their time better. They're going to spend their time with more qualified prospects, regardless of the business. They're probably going to close a higher percentage of that, and they're probably going to earn more commissions as a result. So I don't think it's net a bad thing, but I do, and again, from my biased digital marketing perspective, I do think that a lot of online, in particular, online lead acquisition can fall under the marketing umbrella.
Well, but the point I was making is actually heard of companies now where marketing is actually managing the inside sales team. The guys, what they call sales development reps, that are actually, doing the proactive outbound calling. So they're doing their online lead generation, their inbound marketing, content marketing campaigns, and when they get the sales qualified leads, that first call being made of the sales qualified lead is part of the marketing department.
Yeah, I think that's a mistake. I mean, I think, like, for example, we have despite my experience in direct sales and feeling pretty comfortable with it, we have a national sales manager who's a sales manager. That's what he does, right? And we have a lot of people that are doing marketing internally. And I would recommend any company, if you have salespeople, you have a sales manager, and that person is sales oriented. I think they're different animals. So to hear that, I would say, if I had a client that was basically, in terms of their hierarchy or their org chart, putting all of their outbound, sales callers underneath someone from a marketing expertise, I think that's probably a mistake. I think culturally, they're also not always the same kinds of people with the same goal sets.
Well, it raises an interesting question, and philosophically, which is, is proactive outbound calling, proactive prospect development, is that really a sales function or a marketing function? Right? I mean, isn't it, to some degree, it's about creating awareness. You're not actually selling something. And these inside sales teams these days are really just selling a meeting with an account exec that's going to, follow up with them at that point.
Yeah, I mean, if you're talking about dialing for dollars off of a bought list, I think you could make the argument that that's a marketing function. But I just think, as far as organizational theory and who's going to be training those people, how they develop along, I think that's a sales role. I think that's someone that should really be trained as a salesperson as opposed to a marketer. There's certainly overlap, right? The Venn diagram is pretty healthy in the middle there, but
right.
I think that person should have a sales mentality, should have a, hunter-gatherer as opposed to farmer mentality. And I think marketing is a lot more farming, planting a lot of seeds and kind of reaping what you sow. So there's different stuff out there. But I think,
Well, actually, one of the interesting arguments about that people make, and this is, I'd be interested in your opinion on this, is about continued reliance. And I'm a sales guy, so on outbound prospecting, is that opportunities sourced through a proactive outbound strategy, qualified opportunities sourced through a proactive outbound strategy, end up having a higher lifetime contract value and convert at a higher rate than leads that are generated through digital marketing. And personally, I think that's anecdotal, and I don't think it's true, but I'm interested in your opinion, because there's a lot of people that hold that opinion.
Yeah, I don't have the data to say definitively, like you said, it's anecdotal, but I don't know that I would necessarily say that. Here's what I will say. If we're looking at lifetime value of the contract and long-term retention, I think that's plausible. But from an efficiency standpoint, those are happening way less frequently, in my mind anyway, than the qualified leads that are happening from digital marketing efforts. At least those are bearing fruit less frequently. But when they do bear fruit, is it possible that they last longer? It's possible. I for one, would respond better to digital marketing. If we're being anecdotal, I can express my opinion, which is that for me, I think the act of discovery and digital nurturing appeals more to me than someone calling me unsolicited or reaching out on email unsolicited, and then me kind of feeling like I'm being sold, as opposed to gently discovering and being nurtured through the process digitally. But different strokes. Now, whether that leads me to stay longer or not, I don't know. I don't know that that's.
Well, I think, I don't personally. I don't think it does. I mean, I think that, and I always get comments on that. But I mean, in the business to business space, the assumption is at some point, a salesperson is involved with the buyer's journey, right? And whether it happens, top of funnel or halfway down the funnel, as most people project these days, the Challenger customer book that came out from CEB talking about, buyers are 50+% of the way through the buyer's journey before they ever engage with a sales rep. Somehow, I think that first point of engagement doesn't really dictate the ultimate size of the deal or how long they stay with you. But
exactly, I think that'd be, if that was corollary in any way, I would chalk that up to the number of. There's a lot of those weird corollary stats that are out there, like greenhouse gases have gone up as something else weird has gone down that doesn't relate to it, right? It's sometimes trend lines are there just kind of independent of each other. But I would be surprised that a human being earlier in that process yielded a longer net value. I think the net value of that contract probably has to do with execution and retention more so than whether or not they saw an ad or got a cold call.
Yeah, absolutely true. I agree. So, all right, so good. So, last question, and this, then we'll go into the last segment of the show. It's just you sort of talked about it before, but in an ideal world for me is sales reps just sell and they don't do any proactive outbound. But we haven't seemed to reach that point of an ideal world yet, where that's so. Sales reps still have to go out and do that. But really, what do you see coming in the next? You sort of alluded to it, but in the next 2 to 5 years, that's fundamentally going to change the equation so that maybe a lot of this proactive outbound activity goes away, and sales is really focused on dealing with sales qualified leads that they're really then taking up and moving to the end of the journey.
Yeah, I mean, well, first of all, I would say that I think that's I like that idea because, and I don't know how much of this you heard before I got cut off, but
none.
Great, perfect. The notion of people doing people work, soft skills, emotional intelligence, communication skills. You and I having a conversation as human beings is super important, but we can communicate through email about things that are less important, and both of us could even have autoresponders that are talking to each other for half of it, right? Mm-hmm. I like the idea of people spending their time doing people things. So the further we can get a prospect down the line, the further down the funnel, so that once a human being is involved with that part of the process, it's only when they need to be, then everybody's using their time most efficiently, right? And we're using people for those kinds of things. So I think all of the tools that are great out there with automated email marketing, and we're getting better and better as marketers about placing cookies in browsers and understanding where that user is in terms of the life of the lead, and getting them the right time messaging based on what other products or services they're looking at. And all that technology it's already here. It's just going to get more and more accessible. So more and more businesses are going to be using retargeting and email marketing in particular to get people the right kinds of messages that get them further down through the funnel. I'm a big fan of that. And I think that there's lots of technology. If you asked somebody 5 years ago what MailChimp was, they'd look at you funny. Now I don't know too many people that don't use MailChimp for something, right?
Or something equivalent, right?
Yeah, or something equivalent, exactly. So now all of those tools like MailChimp and HubSpot and Constant Contact and Salesforce and all these other things are getting so technical and complex, but with easier and easier user interfaces and really nice APIs where Salesforce can talk to whatever email service provider you're using, can talk to whatever website you're using, whatever cart you're using. And also, in all likelihood, you've placed a cookie through a small script on your website on the browser of everybody that's been to your site. And so all these things are talking to each other. We're understanding what consumers are doing. The analytics platforms are getting better and better for segmentation and cohort analysis. So I'm a fan, right? I'm a fan of all that stuff. not just because I'm in the digital marketing space, but also because I think it allows people to leverage technology so that we as people can spend our time having the most interesting and relevant conversations for our businesses, right?
Yep, well, I agree. Good answer. All right, so we're going to move into the last segment of the show. I've got some standard questions I ask all my guests, and the first one is a hypothetical scenario, and you're the star of this scenario.
All right.
In which you've just been hired as a new sales leader at a company whose sales have stalled out, and senior management really wants to get unstuck. So what 2 things would you do your first week on the job that would have the biggest impact?
So the first 2 things I would do, regardless of team size, I would meet with every single person there and let them tell me what it is that they love about the job and what it is they hate about the job, as well as how they measure their own efficacy. I think if I understood those 3 things from everybody on that team, that gives me a great starting point, and sort of just let them air it out. I think the people management side is probably the most important, and I think people will only work a certain amount for people that they don't like or feel respected by or trust with or those things. So I am big on making sure that from an interpersonal standpoint, things are buttoned up on day one.
Okay.
Second thing is I would either implement or make better whatever tracking methodology they were using. In all likelihood, they're not tracking every single point of the sales cycle. If they were tracking every single point of the sales cycle, they may not know what sort of standard percentages are from a new lead to how many of those do we get a hold of within 24 hours, within 72, how many touch points does it take us to get someone on the phone once we do, how long is an average call, if we're using a slide sharing tool like Prezi or something like that, how many of those are we getting through, how many hours of FaceTime do we have with our clients, what's our closing percentage after first call, second call, third call, are we generating referrals? There are 100 metrics that I'd probably want to know, and so either implementing or enhancing the tracking methodology would be my second thing.
Okay, good answer. So some rapid fire questions. You can give me 1-word answers, or you can elaborate. But first one is, when you personally are outselling and have been outselling, what's your most powerful sales attribute?
I'm really friendly. I'm really nice. I think I'm just an approachable guy.
So you quickly build rapport.
That's a great way to frame it. Yep.
All right, good. So do you manage sales for your company?
Until Monday, yeah.
Okay, well, so what tool do you use for sales management that you can't live without?
I would say SharpSpring and Salesforce. Salesforce more as a CRM.
And SharpSpring is what?
SharpSpring's a CRM with a cool little tool built in that allows you to see what a prospect has done either on your website or with your emails. So it gives you this thing called Life of the Lead, where you can see how somebody's interacted with you and your brand over the course of their time.
Okay, so fundamentally email tracking, sort of like Yesware or ToutApp or something like that.
Similar, but also on site. That's sort of the big distinguishing factor.
Okay.
So if you go to the products page of my website, I know that.
All right. Okay. Who's your sales role model?
My sales role model. It's a great question. I'm doing poorly in the rapid fire format. I'll say Jim Rohn.
Okay, good answer. What's one book that every salesperson should read?
How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie.
Great answer. It's probably the number one on the, probably tied with Napoleon Hill's book, Think and Grow Rich. But those two, it's amazing. We have classics from the 30s are still the most relevant books that people recommend.
Right? It's amazing.
Here's a tough question. So what's on your playlist right now? What music's on your playlist?
What music's on my playlist? That's good. Killer Mike, who's a rapper from Atlanta, and Foo Fighters. Mm-hmm. And if I pulled up let's see here. Oh, and then another rapper from Minneapolis named Prof.
Minneapolis, back to the roots. Okay.
Back to the roots. In fact, the Rhyme Sayers has a playlist that I just pretty much listen to all the time. It's a record label out of Minneapolis.
Got it. Okay. Last question for you then. So what's the first sales activity you do every day?
first sales activity I do in my current role is I'll talk to Cole, who's on our sales management team.
Okay. Passing the buck to Cole. Okay.
Passing the buck to Cole. As far as what I do, man, well, at some point before 9:30 a.m., I've probably responded to at least one person that's at some point in our flow to acquire them as a client.
Okay. Good. All right. Well, Tony, that's been great. Thanks for joining the show today. And how can people find out more about you and Hawke Media?
Yeah, Hawke Media, HAWKE media.com. So Hawke with an E, media.com. Check us out online. We do really good work. We are incredibly affordable on any budget, and we provide a free 30-minute consultation for anybody looking to grow their business online.
All right. Well, great. Well, thanks for joining me. And remember, friends, make it a part of your day every day to deliberately learn something new to help you accelerate your success. And one easy way to do that is to make this podcast part of your daily routine, whether it's on your commute, in the gym, or make it a part of your morning sales huddle. But then you'll make sure you don't miss any of my conversations with top business experts like my guest today, Tony Delmercado, who share their expertise about how to accelerate the growth of your business. So thanks for joining us. And until next time, this is Andy Paul. Good selling, everyone.
Thanks for listening to the show. If you like what you heard and want to make sure you don't miss any upcoming episodes, please subscribe to this podcast on iTunes or Stitcher.com. For more information about today's guest, visit my website at andypaul.com.